listener production.
I'm automotive commentator and journalist Greg Rust, and this is Rusty's Garage. We're releasing this episode in the lead up to MotoGP, the Australian Grand Prix at Phillip Island, one of my favourite times of the year. Our guest spent decades on the tour and for a while worked in Formula One, at times even leapfrogging between the two in a crazy busy chapter of his life. His comms and PR work saw him making content well before we even used that term, and working on events for all sorts of automotive brands and motorsport partnerships. He's a best-selling author too, but most of you will know him for his commentary. In fact, he was widely regarded as the voice of MotoGP before his retirement in 2017, a part of his life that he admits was difficult to give up or shift into park. Nick Harris, as you'll hear, has worked with the greats. He shares some wonderful insights and stories on them as we chat here. His career spans the revered 500cc period, which many of you listening remember so fondly. Its heroes and their feats of bravery on those awesome two-stroke machines. And almost 2 decades of the new four-stroke era as well, which is now producing arguably some of the most competitive racing we've seen. Yes, there'll be a Barry Sheen story or two. Nick knew him well, and he vividly recalls their final meeting before Baz left us, sadly. Nick is now in his 70s, and while he's not at the rounds as often these days, that doesn't mean he's stopped contributing. More on that later. And he's still working around football in the UK too, his other love, Oxford United. I should really have done this pod ages ago in the Island Media Centre after he hosted one of his countless press conferences in that unmistakable Nick Harris style. But we'll make do with the interweb. From this convo, you would never know that we were 17,000 k's apart. And that's because of the truly endearing and likeable person that Nick is. I hope you enjoy some of the tales from almost 50 years working around the sport. Nick Harris, welcome to the podcast.
Honoured to be with you, Rusty. Long time no see, and all my friends in Australia, long time no see as well, and so many great memories.
Well, let's get to a few of those a little bit later. Can we talk about your wonderful career, which is still going, I might add? You are busy even now, aren't you?
Yeah. It's absolutely crazy, to be honest with you. This MotoGP guru, podcast like this. I write a blog every week. I'm very busy with football locally, that I always have been. Yeah, it was supposed to be different, but it's absolutely flat out. But yeah, I tell you what, it's a lot better than sitting at home with your slippers on.
Exactly. Have you started the day, because it's night time here, but morning there, have you started the day with a cuppa, Nick?
I've had 2 cuppers. God, I couldn't start the day without 2 cuppers. It's a lovely autumnal morning. We've had some unbelievable weather in England the last few days. 25 degrees in October, unheard of. The leaves are just beginning to fall from the trees, and you just get the sense that, well, autumn, winter is getting closer.
Okay. Can we do a little walk down memory lane about you? I know you'll invariably want to talk about bikes and some of the heroes on them and some of the stories that you've covered along the way. You touched on it a little bit there before about your love of football as well. You were born in the late 40s near Oxford. Am I right in saying your dad had a love of sport but not necessarily motor racing? And where did the connection come from for you?
Right, yeah, my dad was a sports mad. Cricket, we used to tune in at 5 o'clock in the morning for the test matches in Australia. He used to fade and come and fade on the radio. I remember writing to the England team in Australia. Len Hutton was the captain, and he sent me a letter back with a signature. I think England actually won that. Rare, England won that series. I think, yeah, we were cricket mad, rugby mad as well. dear old dad, and then I got more interested in football and motorcycles. But that's life. I mean, Oxford is certainly there was an incredible city to grow up in if you were keen on sport. Roger Bannister ran that first 4-minute mile at Oxford. The university rugby, soccer, cricket, especially teams were first class. So you were watching absolute first class sport every week. That wasn't the same with the football. That came differently with first Oxford City and then Oxford United.
Yeah. Now, from a motor racing point of view, am I right in saying that on the two-wheel side, you might have seen Murray Walker's dad race at one point, and I think maybe Mike Hailwood's machine left a really lasting impression on you as a young fella, didn't it?
It certainly did. Mike Hailwood lived just across the hill from here in Boars Hill, and his dad, Stan Hailwood, ran Kings of Oxford. There was a street in Oxford that was just full of motorcycle dealerships in those days, and they'd be lying down the streets. I remember cycling to school one day, dreading what was going to happen because I hadn't done my homework as always, and in the window of Kings of Oxford was Mike Hailwood's 250 Honda that he'd won the TT on. His dad, I think, had just a one-off ride on that 250 four-cylinder Honda, and it was in the window at Kings of Oxford. I remember I just couldn't believe it. Wow. And I was set. But started off, again, Oxford had a very good speedway team.
Right.
So I was a very keen speedway fan. Every Thursday we'd go to the speedway, hot dog programme, bit of flirting on the back of the bus coming home, fish and chips. And a boy from the village, Keith Hickman, was a very good scrambler, as we called it days, rather than motocross. Yeah. Went on to ride for the BSA Works team. So we used to cycle to the local scramble tracks all over the place and got very keen. And it was very big on television in those days in Britain, on both channels. Scrambling, Murray Walker doing the commentary for the BBC, and I really, really got interested in scrambling rather than road racing, till a friend, father and a lad at school and his dad, we went to Mallory Park, and I remember getting out of the car and Hailwood was coming into that Mallory Park hairpin, I think probably on the Honda 6, it might have been on the 4, and just hearing it, and I was thinking, oh, this is for me, this is what I want to watch and be involved in.
Hey, now you took the mickey out of yourself there a minute ago. This is a bit of a loaded question. Were you any good at school? Because it hasn't affected your career at all if you weren't.
No, afraid not. No, I got far more interested in motorcycles, football and girls. And consequently, I left school with 1O level, and that was 2 attempts. Went to work in the local solicitor's office because my mum and dad knew the local solicitor as a clerk, to be honest with you. But I'll tell you another story. One day, I'm sitting there, I am so bored, I'll tell you. And I was going to Alton Park the next day. It's when Hailwood had left Honda. Honda had withdrawn, but they gave him a bike so he'd ride at selected events. So it was a big thing to go to. And the phone rang, it was the boss from upstairs. It was a smashing bloke. He said, oh, Nick, there's somebody I want you to meet before he goes, and I think you ought to come up. So up I went, and then I went, and there was Hailwood. He'd come to sign some papers there, and I shook hands with God as he was in those days to me. And, I was, for once in my life, Rusty, I was speechless. I just didn't know what to say. Yeah.
To this day, he is still very much a hero for you. I mean, you've met and worked alongside some unbelievable people in motorcycle racing in your career, Nick, but he is right up there for you, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. I think, one, that he comes from our neck of the woods. That's great. 2, he used to go to the jazz club in Oxford. My sister went there, and I just said, right, you get with this Mike Hailwood, I want him as a boyfriend. It never happened, actually, but I was very disappointed with her, my sister. She let me down badly. Yeah, the thing with Hailwood, he could ride any bike, 125, right up to 500s, 2-stroke, 4-strokes, and could ride at any circuits. He could win at the TT. He could win proper road racing circuits. So he was amazing. Yeah, he's right up there with the very, very best, and tragically losing his life in a motor accident and losing his daughter in the crash as well was absolutely horrendous. And I spoke to his widow, who sadly passed away now, when he was inducted into the MotoGP Hall of Fame, and she was telling me when he saved the life of the Formula One driver, was it Andretti Kailami in South Africa, when he dived into the burning car and pulled him out. She said he came back to the pits afterwards and never said a word to anybody about it. Just
wow.
And he got the George Medal in Britain for an act of bravery.
Bravery.
Remarkable person. And then to come back and win the TT at, what was he, 39 years old, I mean.
Amazing.
You can't write stories like that, can you? They just have to happen.
No. Your first, am I right in saying that one of your first bike Grand Prix was actually the Dutch TT in the early 70s, maybe 1973? Was that the first one you went to as a young fellow?
It certainly was, yeah. We were massive Jarno Saarinen fans, me and my mates. And so we said we're not going to go to the TT, which was a big thing. Not to go to the TT in the Isle of Man. We went every year. It was like a pilgrimage. But we were going to go to the Dutch TT instead. And, of course, tragically, Saarinen was killed at Monza before then. We still went. We had an absolute ball. We'd hardly ever been abroad. There was beer at 6 o'clock in the morning, chips with mayonnaise. It was just
the Fritz.
It was absolutely amazing. And I think all of us, I think me in particular, decided this is just fantastic. Then we used to go every year to different events. We went to Spa, I think, the year after, and then 75 we went back to Assen, and that's where Sheen won his first ever 500cc Grand Prix. And you can imagine we'd had a few beers before. We had a lot of beers afterwards, I can assure you. It was great.
We'll get to Barry because I want to pick your brain on a couple of good stories if we can. You mentioned before about a job in a solicitor's office and that maybe not working out and so on. You ended up, am I right, that there was a distribution manager's job, maybe for the Oxford Journal. That didn't kind of work out, but you did get some work around your football and BBC Radio and things like that. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, I mean, the best. I was very happy. I'd left I went to work in a sports shop, then came a rep for the south of England. Very happy, but then they launched a local paper in Oxford called the Oxford Journal. I went. I knew the guys that were funding it and running it. I went to see them. And they said, we'd want a distribution manager. You know Oxford and the area better than anybody. Are you interested? I said, no, I'm really happy what they're doing. They offered me 3 times the money and a company car. So I said, well, I'll have a think about it for a minute. Thought about it for a minute. It's the best thing I ever did, because not only was I distribution manager, which was pretty grim, picking up bundles of newspapers and Donington Bridge in Oxford on a Monday morning and stuff like that, but I started writing for the local bits and pieces for the paper, and it went from there. And the big breakthrough, Oxford United played in Italy in the Anglo-Italian Cup, and the man that was running the Oxford Journal wanted to become chairman of Oxford United, and he summoned to his office and said, "You're going to Italy tomorrow with Oxford United." I mean, I'd hardly been abroad. I'd not written a football match report since I was at school, primary school, that went up on the notice board, and off I went with Oxford United. And it really kicked off from then with Radio Oxford, with the football and things, and then I was lucky, job came up at Motorcycle News. I got persuaded to apply for it, which I never thought I had a chance in hell, and I was working at Motorcycle News, and then the world just opened up into a completely different world.
I'm glad you kind of corrected me there before too. I said it didn't work out. What I meant was it did. You didn't necessarily want to begin with. I didn't want to be
I didn't want to be under Donington Bridge every Monday picking up bundles of newspapers hadn't been delivered amongst dog stuff and needles and everything else. No. I'd had enough of that.
Our world has changed so much now. We can talk, as we're doing now, over the internet, basically. But back then, Nick, we're talking phone reports, filing results by phone, telex machines, if you could get one, and all sorts, weren't you? It
was an amazing. I went to Motorcycle News, and the first year I did the British Superbike Championship, which was fantastic because all the top Grand Prix riders came to ride in it because it's the only way they made any money, to be honest with you. So the likes of Barry Sheen, Mick Grant, others came and rode it. It was a great thing to do. But then the motocross correspondent for Motorcycle News, Patrick Crichton, he got caught reversing up the motorway, going to the British Motocross Grand Prix because he'd missed the turning. He got banned from driving. So I was summoned into the office and they said, Nick, you're doing the motocross. I went, oh, no, I don't really do. I'm so happy doing what I did. It was great. I did 2 years travelling all over Europe. It taught me really how to look after myself, how to file a story. I was lucky Graham Noyce, who became a great friend of mine, won the World Championship as well. It was a great experience. But I always wanted to be the road racing man. And in the end, the chance came at Motorcycle Weekly. But yeah, sorry to your original question. Oh, it was, you just, one, getting a pass, that was hard enough because each individual circuit issued the passes. Two, finding a phone that worked was virtually impossible. To file the copy over, you would have an operator on a telex machine would file all your early copy of gossip and practice. You had to type out all the results. And in those days, there was 50s, 125s, 250s, 350s, 500 sidecars, 6 classes. You had to type all that out. And then after you'd done all that, you try and find that phone, either at the circuit, which I say was very difficult, or back at the hotel, and then you'd be on the phone 2 hours, 2.5 hours, phoning copy over. Some of the copy takers were great. Others, you could tell when you go, right, off we go. Then Barry Sheen, and they say, how do you spell that? You go, God, this is going to be a long night. And it was a long night, but it really, really taught you, one, how to survive, and two, how to gather news and how to somehow get it back. Photographs were taken by the photographers who gave you the films. Then you had to bring them back, develop them, and then you choose the pictures with a sheet. Yeah, I mean, it was crazy and very, very hard work, especially on a Sunday. But I was young. I was traveling the world watching motorcycles race. So
racing.
I wasn't grumbling. Yeah.
No, amazing grounding for the life to come for you in many ways. Yeah. Great skills. Your first Grand Prix, though, fittingly took you when I'm talking as a journalist covering it. Did it not take you full circle? You went back to the Dutch TT in about 1980.
Yeah, it did. It was amazing. Typical me. When I started at Motorcycle News and I went to do the motocross, there was a strike, so I missed 2 or 3 Grand Prix at Motorcycle News. I then go to Motorcycle Weekly, strike, big strike, and we were out of work for a month or more, so I missed the opening 2 or 3 Grand Prix. I was going to miss the TT, but I went to the TT independently. While I was at the TT, the news came that everything had been resolved, and off we went. Yeah, the first one I went to with dear old Mick Woodard, who was the editor, was to Assen. Yeah, it was. It had to be in many ways. And Jack Middelberg won the race, the Dutch rider. And wow, I've been to some crazy places and crazy scenes since, but that was absolute mayhem. It was brilliant that he won the 500cc. Dear old Jack, of course, sadly lost his life as well.
An amazing place, Nick. I mean, we'll talk about some great tracks along the way, but I mean, Dutch race is very special for all sorts of reasons, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is the only original track from that very first World Championship in 1949, a year before Formula One started, bikes started, and Assen's been there ever since. It is an amazing circuit. The crowds are incredible considering there's such a lack of Dutch success in Grand Prix racing, and has been for a long, long time. They still turn up in their droves. It's the track has had to be altered over the years, and obviously the cynics and the purists say, oh, it's not as good as it was. No, it probably isn't, but there was reasons it had to be altered, not just safety reasons, wildlife and everything else, but a lot of the original track is still there. It's a very, very special place to go to.
The Isle of Man TT has featured rather significantly in your time from books to the coverage that you spoke about before and so on. Just give us a sense of the impact that event has had on you, because it is last bastion stuff nowadays. The track is remarkable. What they do on those machines, the heroics, is incredible even now, and some greats have ridden it over time. I mean, I look now, Nick, at colleagues perhaps in the four-wheel world like Mark Webber. If you get Mark Webber talking about the Isle of Man TT, you almost won't stop him. He raves about it, taking people there and letting them see and experience what it is like.
It's incredible. 37 miles of absolutely everything. I go every year to the Manx Grand Prix, which is a classic event. We always go in September we call it, it's the old boys trip. Three of the lads will go with have raced in the Manx and racing the TT, and there's me one sidecar lap of the TT, and we go every year. We have a wonderful time. Most of the people there have got grey hair like me, but it's an absolutely unique event. There is nothing like it in the world. Of course, in those early days, when I think I first went in '65 on a day trip, when you went over on the ferry in the morning, watched the race, and came back to Liverpool that night and saw Hayward and Agostini and everybody else. It was the World Championship event. It was the only World Championship event in Britain. So it was the British Grand Prix, but it was at the TT. Of course, that has changed since with Silverstone and Donington, when a lot of people wouldn't ride there because it's too dangerous. And I think that's important, that people have the prerogative if they don't want to ride there, because not everybody wants to ride there. But as a spectacle, to go somewhere, I can think of so many bends. You go somewhere, Rencullen or somewhere, and they're coming through there 150, 160 miles an hour with their shoulders touching brick walls. There's a road sign at Rencullen. I noticed it this year, 40 mile an hour speed limit, and they're coming through there about 150 miles an hour. It is dangerous. They're lapping there over 130 miles an hour now. Perhaps that is a bit too quick. Perhaps the bikes are a bit too powerful, but I think anybody who loves motorcycle racing, loves racing two or four wheels, you've got to go to the TT at least once, just to feel, one, what it was like in the past, but even now, just how incredible it is.
Before we move on and talk more of your career, you've mentioned Hailwood there before. It would be remiss of us not to get an observation or a thought from you on the great Giacomo Agostini. I mean, to get to see him at the TT, I think you've mentioned in other publications, and rightly so, that his record will never likely, be beaten. He's just an amazing human being, an athlete, wasn't he?
He was,
isn't he? Yeah.
Everything about him was right. One, he was the best motorcycle racer in the world. Two, he was so good looking, he attracted so many pretty young ladies to his life. Three,
he's still youthful now, isn't he?
Oh, he is, isn't he? Yeah, he is. He was amazing. Yeah, people would say, he came at the right time. Yeah, he did. He had the best machinery with the MV Augustus. They were far better than anything else, the 350s and the 500s and the 3-cylinder and the 4-cylinder. But I think what some people forget also, right at the end of his career, he switched to Yamaha, and he became the first ever rider to win the 500cc World Championship on a two-stroke machine. And that, I think, just speaks volumes how good he was. And you've still got to ride the bike. You might have the best car, you might have the best bike. You still got to go out there and lap the Isle of Man at 108 miles an hour. You've still got to win. These races were long races, 2 hours long as well. It's very, very different to the races we see now.
Tell me about the move into commentary. You detailed there before about your love of Oxford United. Your first kind of public broadcast of anything was football in the early sort of 70s. We tend to think of you now, Nick, for your commentary of bike racing and what you did in that great period for the sport, but it was actually football more or less that kicked it off, wasn't it, in terms of commentary?
It was. I'm totally in love with Oxford United. Still am. The old eyes aren't good enough for commentary now. I still do punditry. They still have to. They still have to listen to me, and I still go to all the home games. Yeah. Yes, it was. I was lucky because Oxford drew 0-0 in Bologna. But I mean, amazing that it was Bologna as well, where that first game was. Of course, the home of Ducati, and really right in the heart of motorcycle racing territory. And when we came back on the coach, the Radio Oxford guy, Tony Anderson, was waiting and said, "Would you like to come and make the tea and read the football results?" I said, "That sounds okay for me." I think it was £2 I got for each shift I did. It meant stop playing football on a Saturday afternoon. So it was quite a big wrench. I love playing local football on a Saturday afternoon. And it honestly really went from there. And I started doing commentaries at events, North Gloucestershire Club, road racing, places like Wroughton and Gaydon, and then grass tracks locally. And it really took off from there.
What about the formation of Nick Harris Media Communications? This is another hat that you wear. This is bringing together all the talents that we've spoken about so far, and it involved all sorts of things, Nick, didn't it? From promotional work to media managing the Rothmans Honda team and so on.
Yeah, it did. Motorcycle Weekly sadly ceased, so we all got made redundant. I got to say, we were looked after very well by IPC, and I set up on my own, and that meant going to the races, sleeping in the paddock, travelling. John Brown, Paul Fowler, my great friends, helped me enormously with car hire, and Ray Daniel, the photographer, sleep in the awning of his van, and all good things that really, really set you up for later on. And when you see people moaning, sometimes you think you've got it so good, you don't start worrying about that. But and Nick Harris Media Communications, Chas Mortimer was setting up a race team, Silverstone Armstrong, based at Silverstone. Jimmy Brown, who ran the Silverstone circuit, they just started staging the Grand Prix, and he was very keen that the bikes got a lot more going for them. And Chas asked me to come along and do the PR, and that's exactly what I did with Neil Mackenzie, one of the main riders, and Donny McLeod. They both very good riders and did well in the World Championship. As far as, I'm just thinking back to the broadcasting, that really came, I was in South Africa, 1983. It was the first race back of Barry Sheene after his horrendous Silverstone crash. So it was a massive, massive thing. And BBC Radio rang me up and said Chris Carter, who was doing the radio for them, was doing the television commentary for ITV, because it was big news in Britain. They've been trying to get hold of Barry Sheene. Was there any chance I could get hold of him, and could he do an interview? Well, this was the night before the race. So I went and knocked on Barry's hotel room door. He was already in bed with Stephanie, 7 o'clock in the evening, getting a good night's sleep before the race. I said, "Barry, sorry to disturb you." I said, "The BBC wonder if you..." He said, "Okay, Nicholas," as he always called me. "What's the number?" He dialed the number. The person answered the phone. He said, "Hello, it's Barry Sheene here. I think you want to do an interview." "Nicholas told me," he said. That's it. And then I did the race with the BBC, and it went from there. But that was Barry helping you all the way. I'll never forget. "Hello, Barry Sheene here. You want to do an interview, don't you? Nicholas told me." Yeah.
I love it. We will tap into your memory bank of him as we go, if you don't mind. In finishing some of the stuff around what you do with Nick Harris Media Communications, even now, can we bounce through a couple of names from the Rothmans Honda period there? Firstly, Eddie Lawson.
Eddie, yeah. Caught completely by surprise. I was sitting at home, phone rang, David Beck from Rothmans. "We've signed Eddie Lawson." We signed Eddie Lawson. Yeah, he's going to do a year with Wayne Gardner in the Rothmans Honda team, 1989. He'd won 3 world titles for Yamaha. I thought David was joking. I said, "Does Wayne know?" "No, not yet." Put the phone down. The phone rings at me. He said, "Wayne Gardner here." "What the is going on? Is it true they've signed Eddie Lawson?" I said, "Oh, sorry, Wayne, I don't know anything about that." I thought I'd better keep out of it when Wayne was absent. So I got dispatched to California, a secret dispatch that comes just before Christmas. Eddie had always been really difficult with the media, so I was a bit nervous. We lived in Uplands in California. We spent 3 wonderful days with him, filming, interviews, everything, getting everything ready for when the announcement came. We had a great time and came back. Eddie was fantastic for that year to work with. Really, really helpful. Unbelievable. Different Eddie. And of course, he went and won the world title. And so typical Eddie. And he went back to Yamaha. He only did it for 1 year. Oh, that's it. Thank you. I can prove I can win on that. I go back to Yamaha now. Yeah. Won lots of races on Yamaha on the Kajiva before retiring. Very, very underrated world champion. What? 4 times world champion, Eddie? Yeah.
Yeah. We should think of him. I guess what you're saying there, in our memory bank or in a radar sense, in a greater capacity. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I do. There's only with the Marc Marquez switched, obviously, to Ducati from Honda. That's all the big news at the moment. There's only 5 riders that have switched machinery and won a world title on different bikes. Jeff Duke, Valentino Rossi, Casey Stoner, Giacomo Agostini, and Eddie Lawson. They're the only 5 in the 74-year history of the sport in the Premier class that have switched machinery and won the world title on 2 different makes. So, it's, for Eddie to do that and then to go back to Yamaha, but that was so Eddie to do that. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. I won you the world title.
Tick that box.
Back now. That's it. Done that. Yeah.
When you think of Phillip Island, Wayne Gardner's unforgettable wins in the fearsome 500cc era immediately come to mind. In front of a huge home crowd, it changed his life forever. Also, look at me go, I'm really getting this moto lingo.
And I remember leaving the track on Monday, and then there was big signs up on the roads and over the bridge going off Phillip Island. It's got Wayne for PM, and I'm thinking, this is going to be interesting. So I thought one day I might end up in Parliament, as the PM, but I don't want that job. But it was a nice recognition of what happened on the weekend, and everyone just loved it, and it etched my name in stone forever, in that moment. So pretty special moment.
Could you imagine Wayne as PM? Progress really would be his middle name. You can find the WG episode, a 3-parter, in the Rusty Garage library. Now, back to his media manager during the height of Gardner's success, Nick Harris.
You've mentioned Wayne. Let's talk about WG. How did you deal with all that, and then the friendship and stuff that you share? Yeah,
I met Wayne at Daytona when he was riding the Kawasaki, so we got to know each other. Then he came to ride in Britain in the British Superbike Championship. Came over with Donna, and we became great friends. We still are great friends, and he helped me enormously in my career, and I think I helped him enormously. In his career. I mean, Wayne, some stories you can tell, others you can't, but I spent hours outside medical centres or explaining to people why he wasn't there. Not in the medical centre, why he wasn't at places. What a man of steel, what a determined guy. He just never accepted defeat, and when he won that world title in '87 in Guyana in Brazil was just fantastic, and one of my favourite moments. We went to Guyana. I'd never been to Guyana. Found out it was the party city of Brazil pretty quickly. What an amazing, great place to wait to win the world championship, I can assure you. BBC wanted to get him live on the radio immediately after the race if he won the world championship, because he really helped me doing some great stuff on BBC radio after every race. They loved him because he was so funny and telling stories and everything else. So when I got to Guyana, trying to fix it up. Fixing up the local broadcaster was not easy, but they did arrive on the Saturday, but they didn't have a microphone for me, so I had to pay, cash, all things that you learn as you go along. The difficult thing was that the commentary point was on the opposite side of the track to the podium, and I was trying to work out how to get to Wayne after he'd been on the podium to come to the commentary point. I got friendly with the chief of police of Guyana. It was very fortuitous. I think I probably met him in that local club where everybody seemed to go to all the time. The Zoom Zoom club, where the guy would fire the gun into the ceiling to start the night off. And he said, leave it with me. It will be sorted. So I left it to him. Wayne duly had his World Championship T-shirt on, covered in champagne, arrived at the commentary point with 6 armed policemen, rifles and everything, marched up the steps, sat down, and we did the live broadcast into London, and it was brilliant. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. As were the celebrations afterwards, I can tell you, in the Zoom Club. Yeah.
In the Zoom Club. Yeah. I love it. I love it. In your farewell video, which people can find online, that Dorna and MotoGP did, beautiful. You in the press conference, end of 2017. Valentino Rossi kind of ends up chairing it. Jorge Lorenzo, Danny Pedrosa, Marc Marquez. They're all there. And there's a great comment in the midst of that beautiful video from one Jeremy Burgess, who says along the lines, if he ever needs any help with retirement, to give him a call and so on. Can we get a memory of JB? He's been a guest on the podcast as well, because he was around in that whole period with Rothmans while you were there, wasn't he?
He certainly was, yeah. JB, there's so many. Oh, yeah, I can. There's lots. JB and I became great friends. I remember when he came over to Britain and he worked at Suzuki, I think, in those early days, didn't he? And meet him at the TT, and then the Rothmans Honda days, always moaning about the clothing, never fitted and didn't know what they were doing. Yeah. But we're massive cricket fans. So we were in the Saxon Ring. It was the Ashes series. I really can't remember the year. Anyway, one of the top. So Valentino duly won the race, and they used to come into our room where we were commentating before they went onto the podium. So JB was there with him, so he had to get the award. And me and Gavin Emmett were listening to the cricket as well, because we were cricket fanatics. And one of the top, I forget who it was, Australians, was out. So we wrote down he was out, and we said to Jerry, put that in your top pocket, that note, and when you're on the podium, have a look at it. So off we went. Valentino receives. Jerry comes to get the award for Honda. And we can see him now lifting his face with his feet. We still bet on the test matches now, me and Jerry. And he didn't let me off a penny, I can assure you. Not a penny. We do, yeah. We were great pals, and and it was a sad ending to his career. I really don't think it was handled very well with Valentino Rossi and the team, how the news leaked out. These things happened, It happened to me. People feel that it's time to you move on. But I just to find out, as we did in that press conference in Valencia, almost an off-the-cuff comment. Somebody saying, well, we've seen in the Italian press that Jeremy Burgess is leaving. Is that true? Valentino had to admit it. And I don't think it was done properly for such a loyal servant. And all the other Australians with him, Briggsy and everybody else. They were a great team. They were such good fun. They're great to socialise with. Mad on cricket, so we would always have. I took them to Lord's once. I forget what year it was, to the England-Australia game, and Michael Atherton was the captain of England, and he was on 99. I never forget, we all sat there and they were getting a bit annoyed, Jerry and the boys, and then Atherton went for a short run, slipped over, and the Aussies ran him out. They went absolutely cracking. They never let me forget that for years. Yeah, when I took them to Lord's as a gift. Yeah.
That's the end of part one of my feature ep with the voice of MotoGP, Nick Harris. We still have plenty of laps to cover in this edition, leading up to the 2023 Australian Motorcycle Grand Prix at Phillip Island. If you're enjoying this on your way there, please drive or ride carefully. When it's safe to, take part in or jump back to the library and hit the gas on part two. From working in Formula One to bidding farewell to Baz, plus his observations on some of the Aussies who've made their mark in the sport and his island memories too. That's all ahead in part two with Nick Harris here on Rusty's Garage.